So when you're down, you see how the support people do their work. If they're using swivel chair, or there's 18 sticky notes, or they take the stuff that you provided them, they put it in a spreadsheet and do something else so they can put it back into the thing you provided them. Well, guess what you're missing? You're missing a solution, right? Well, if I'm missing a solution, what is that capability that solution provides? Oh, it's this capability. How does that capability fit into my strategy? Did my strategy contemplate that I needed that capability as an organization in order to operate and support?
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative and Google Chrome Enterprise is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership with one of the contributors to my latest book, the #1 best-selling CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, as well as from other top CISOs and cybersecurity thought leaders. Listen to previous CISO Stories episodes at securityweekly.com/CSP. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com. I am your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Jason Elrod, CISO at Multicare Health System.
I think I've always had a defender mindset. And it's one of those ways where you can still be really attracted to technology and I know things you like from I would call it the nerd knobs of that, and still be able to get out there and have that almost that superhero aspect to it, right? You're going to run towards the fire. You're going to help those who can't help themselves. You're going to provide security and confidence and courage to folks who maybe think, technology is a bit of voodoo and dark arts. So you get a chance to come in there and apply your affinity for technology in a fashion that can have a very positive impact to folks, I would say, in that kind of defender mindset. So I always had that, and I found it just a great way to actually realize that in my life.
So I'm curious about that. So where is it that you land on? Is it on the prevention side, or is it running into the crisis, like when there's a crisis activity? Because some people kind of gravitate to either side of that.
I think it's nowadays. I think it's probably a little bit of both. I like to talk to my to folks about that. I say, the key to being a really good CISO, or the key to being really good in cybersecurity or information security, is you have to wake up every morning and think like a supervillain, but act like a superhero. And so I think it's like that component of it. Like, what do I need to know? How do I think like the bad guy but act like the good guy? And I think that's a way to really provide direction in the industry.
Great. Well, today we're going to talk about, establishing a good cybersecurity strategy and the tactics for doing that. So, walk us through that. What are some of those things that you've learned?
Well, I think first off, we have to decide what do the words mean. So we talk about strategy. I'm going to be strategic in my job. Well, at its basic. As most basic understanding, strategy is just how do I plan? It's a plan. How do I plan to do what I need to do in my role? And I think a lot of folks aren't necessarily educated or taught that strategy is a tactic. It's just at a different level in the organization. And it boils down to this. Organizationally, you have a vision, or you have a vision for your role, let's say as a CISO. Then you've got goals that need to be achieved to know that you've realized that vision. And then you use strategy. Then the word strategy comes into play in this sort of strategic architecture. So how do I plan to achieve each of those goals? Then when you work through that, you're going to notice there's a bunch of capabilities you need to fire off that strategy. Now you get to solutions. What are the solutions that I have? People, process, technology that provide me those capabilities that I can fire off in my strategy to achieve the goals, to meet the vision of the role. Now, of course, with solutions, you have things like design, implementation, operation, support, which also need to be considered. So that entire ladder from vision to support is the actual body of work involved with being strategic, because you have to make sure that each of those boxes is filled. And if it's not, then it's really easy to find like parts of your program or parts of your system that need help. Because the areas that you don't contemplate one of those things in line with the rest, I guarantee you that's where you're going to find the most friction or the weakness in your program, where you should probably be spending more time in order to implement that whole strategy.
Well, you're speaking to the choir here, because the CISO Compass book is all about achieving the strategy, and it takes a very holistic view of these 7 different areas that you need to address to make sure that you get to the strategy. And what you're describing is something I've referred to as the top-down method of developing that strategy. And then you can also use the bottom up, where you're coming up from, looking at the technical underpinnings and then moving up to the laws, regulations, and the audit findings and so forth. So how does one start with developing this, making sure that everything is in line with, what the vision of the organization is?
That's a great question. I think, well, like I said, it's a continuum. It goes from vision to support. And what a lot of people don't take into consideration is that support often is the most strategic component of your organization. Because when people are doing, it's like walking the Gemba, right? So when you're down, you see how the support people do their work. If they're using swivel chair, or there's 18 sticky notes, or they take the stuff that you provided them, they put it in a spreadsheet and do something else so they can put it back into the thing you provided them. Well, guess what you're missing? You're missing a solution, right? And well, if I'm missing a solution, what is that capability that solution provides? Oh, it's this capability. How does that capability fit into my strategy? Did my strategy contemplate that I needed that capability as an organization in order to operate and support? And if I didn't, then was my goal really the goal we needed to hit? Did I really understand my goal enough? And does that change my goal? And if it does, is that still in line with what I think the vision is of the organization? So you can walk that ladder back up from support all the way to vision. And I think it's that through line that you really need to pay attention to. So organizationally, let's take an example. Let's say I'm a CISO, right? And so I'm an organizational executive, but my focus is on enterprise risk, most specifically in information security and technology risk, and also subsets like compliance and privacy as well. So that's my vision. Be the organizational executive that does that. So what are my goals? So how do I know I'm achieving that vision? How do I know I'm doing that, right? And this is the functional decomposition we're going through here right now. So I've gone to the vision, CISO, organizational executive, risk-based focus. So what are my goals? Well, how do I need to do that? Well, I need to know that my goals are to reduce organizational risk, increase compliance, and enable business functionalities or business goals. So I can pick one of those. Let's say it's reduce organizational risk. This is the first time I get down to the how, the strategy. How do I plan to reduce organizational risk? Now, there's several different factors on there. Talk about the CISO Compass book. There's 7 different areas, right? You're going to take each one of those areas and you're going to look and make sure you contemplate each one of those. What's my strategy for this? What's this one here? Now, I'm going to come up with my strategy, my how I plan to do that. Then I need to get into the what's. But there's that dependencies in between, right? And that's that capability section. Like if my strategy requires me to have unicorn horns and orphan tears, well, guess what? It's going to be really hard because there's not many solutions out there that provide those to me. So that's a good check right there. As you start working down from that sort of pie in the sky, 10,000 foot view, and start bringing it down to earth. So as you come through it and say, okay, well, now look at my strategies and here's all the capabilities or functional and non-functional requirements that I need within order to do it. Then I can start looking at solutions. What are the solutions that we have, people, process, technology, or could purchase or develop that then provide those capabilities? So let's say you land on that solution point. That's really the transition point between what I would call strategic and tactical. So now you're into that tactical. So here's a solution. Well, this is where you involve your folks. How do I design this to fit in our environment? How does the design fit in my vertical? How does design work within compliance? Then how are we going to implement it with the least amount of disruptions? How are we going to operate it? And how do we support it?
I really like that concept of establishing capabilities in an organization. And what are some of those key capabilities that you've seen that security programs need to have in place?
Key capabilities, auditing, monitoring, metrics. You want to be able to look at your program. How do I identify my assets, right? Something to collect my capability to have all my assets, all my applications. Where's my data? How do I encrypt things? What is an incident response plan? Is another version of a capability. Do I have a capability to respond? So how do I do that? Solution, incident response, strategy. This is how I'm going to fit that back in. So the capabilities is so important. It's literally the foundational Lego building blocks that you're going to use to compose the specific strategy to meet the specific goals of your specific organization. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for well over a decade, specifically for information security. And no two healthcare organizations are the same, even though we're healthcare. Same HIPAA applies, same privacy rules, and those kind of components. But every organization is unique. So you have to have those foundations, but then you're going to compose them into what is the best strategy for me and my organization today. So you can take those and use them, decompose them, recompose them. But if you follow that model, like I said, that strategic architecture model there, you're at least going to know where there's gaps. Like, why isn't this working when I thought it worked? Or why do they have sticky notes down there and extra Excel spreadsheets? Well, maybe there was something missed. Either we missed a capability or the solution isn't provided as we need to. Or maybe the goal itself. I mean, and honestly, this is where you have to be egoless about it. Sometimes the goal, it's not the goal that we need. It's the goal that you want, but it's not the goal that you need as an organization. And that fidelity comes from walking that whole logical level from the biggest macro to the smallest atomic micro.
Where have you found that you've had some goals as a CISO, but your organization wasn't really buying into those goals, but you felt that they're important to the security program?
So I'd like to get razor sharp on this one. Do I have certain strategies and solutions that I want in the organization that's going to provide me capabilities, or do I have different goals? So I don't think I've ever had different organizational goals that have changed. Like I mentioned, reduce risk, increase compliance, enable the business. Those are the goals. That's the macro. How do I know? It's how I know I'm good. How do I plan to do those things? So you can be, let me go out this way. You can be secure and not compliant. And you can be compliant and not secure, technically. And so sometimes I think there's a friction in how you want to do it. There's frictions in the strategy, the how I plan to how do I plan to reduce risk in the organization, or how I plan to enable the business, or how I plan to increase compliance. The friction's usually in the strategy, not in the goals. Because if you're establishing your goals, again, you're an organizational executive, and you have to take the organizational goals into consideration as you develop your specific vertical. So I don't think I've ever encountered that sort of dissonance with the goals, but sometimes dissonance in strategy, right? Like how I wanted to achieve those goals.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. It's interesting when you say that. It comes to mind a conversation I've had with people recently around the difference in our political systems, not to get into politics, but if we look at Republicans and Democrats, at the goal level, for a lot of things. We have very similar goals, but where the conflict arises is how to get there. Do we think that people should have access to health care? Yes. Do we think people should have access to a good education? Yes. Do we think people shouldn't have to live in poverty? Yes. But how we get there is where the rub always is.
Yeah, I heard it applied to, since we're on politics, why not go to nuclear weapons? So I heard it, I heard it applied to that context in negotiating a nuclear weapons treaty. So you could pick either side of it. Everybody should have nukes. Nobody should have nukes. Right? So those are two diametrically opposed ideologies. But you have to ask yourself, if for what purpose? So if everybody had nukes, what would I get? And if nobody had nukes, what would I get? And this is that point of kind of moving logically to a point where everybody agrees. Well, I would feel safe. I would have safety and security. Okay, to your point, we all want safety and security. We could agree on that. Then as we sort of move down into that strategy, we kind of strike down into the more atomic of it, it's the details. That's where the dissonance comes into it. So I can say, hey, and I don't know which side you want to be on this one. You want to be all nukes or no nukes today? So let's say you're all nukes and I'm no nukes. But you come to me and say, hey, you know what? If I could ensure everybody's secure and everybody's safe and everybody had nukes, would that be okay? And this is where you start having that conversation. Well, yeah, I guess so, but I don't like it. I don't like the idea, but that works. And vice versa, I could say, well, if everybody could be safe and secure and nobody had nukes, would that be okay? Well, yes, because this is our goal. And that's how we get to that negotiation standpoint. How do I know that we're meeting the right goals of the organization? Everybody gets nukes, nobody gets nukes. And then, or you're right. Is it left or right, Republican, Democrat, or is it somewhere in the middle? Or is it, or what is it? If we all know what the goal is, and I think as we're talking about like the vision, what's the vision of the organization? What's the overall vision? Why are we here? Then we can slowly move down that solution stack, that strategy architecture, and maintain only as fast as we can maintain agreement. Here's vision organization. Great. Here are my goals. Are we still aligned? Yep. Here's my strategy to achieve this goal. Well, okay, great. We can get that goal. Here's the capabilities. Well, okay. Here's a solution. It costs how much?
Right.
And that's where you roll through it.
I teach a workshop every now and then, and it's a strategy workshop. And one of the steps that I have people do is create a vision statement. And it's interesting across security officers how difficult that really is to get something in terms that meets the organization, isn't too wordy, is concise enough. What sort of tips do you have about creating that vision that's aligning with the vision of the organization?
Well, my tips on that one: make it succinct. Limit yourself to like 2 to 3 sentences tops. I mean, as far as vision. So I think I mentioned it. At a vision level, your job as the chief information security officer in an organization is to act as the organizational executive in the context of information security, technology risk, privacy, compliance. So you're going to be the subject matter expert at the executive level in that context. So your vision is to actually fulfill that role. So I wouldn't get more nuanced than that. And because if you know that, then you can get and start decomposing it. Like, well, hey, what does it mean? What does it mean to the information security and technology risk enterprise representative?
And how do you sell this strategy to the organization? And how do you know when it's going right versus going wrong?
I said you check alignment. Check alignment along the way. I talked about vision and then go into the goals. And we ask, and as I move down to strategy, hey, is this still aligned with everybody? So as you move down from the macro to the micro, make sure that you have clear, transparent, clean communication. And so it's always that check-in. So you're not trying to say, okay, great, here's the vision. Bang, I need $10 million for a solution. So what's happened is when you do that, when you don't involve folks from that, and those are literal steps: vision, goals, strategies, capability, solution. If I go from vision to solution, people, and I don't explain that fall line, if I don't explain that logical narrative of how I got there, people are going to make it up. So if you, and they'll make up a reason, they'll say, well, if this is the vision of the organization and he wants this solution, that must mean, and they'll insert in some kind of crazy in between. maybe it matches your vision, maybe it matches what you actually were thinking, but chances are it's going to be based on what their interpretation of selecting that solution for this vision might mean. So if you find dissonance in there between organizational like goals you set and solution asks, it's because you haven't enumerated the pieces in between. You haven't explained, hey, look, this is my strategy. This is how I plan to do it. I'm going to follow the NIST CSF. We're going to do identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. And now we've got this other kind of reputational bit we're going to put in there, right? So these are the big macros, the framework we're going to use. That's my strategy, right? Follow this. And it has these lines and it needs these capabilities. And these are the solutions that are going to provide that for us. There might be multiple solutions for doing encryption or VPN or firewalls or asset management. But that becomes less important than understanding the path I took. Mm-hmm. And you maintain alignment. There is no selling per se in that. It's walking the path with folks and explaining your well-formed thought, your logical narrative on how you got from vision to the solution, or even from solution to implementation or to support. There's a great story I read, and I'm going to butcher it, but I'm going to say it anyways. Where President was walking down, Kennedy, I think, was walking down the hall at NASA, and a janitor was there cleaning the hallway. Excuse me. President Shop says, "Hey, hi, I'm President. What do you do here?" And the individual turned and said, "I help put people on the moon." Bang. That's it. Because that person knew that the job they did provided a solution. They provided capabilities, clean halls, working through it. Everybody could do their job, not have to worry about it. That allowed a strategy to work, that allowed people to put people on the moon. So people understood their role and why were they doing it. That's a purpose-driven work environment when you can do that. And when you lack that, you end up having lack of attachment to purpose because you haven't drawn a line.
That's a great story. And it reminds me, I used to work for American Airlines. And safety is clearly one of the key things of the airline industry. And the airline industry had gone through a period where there were some airlines that had some accidents and had some fatalities associated with them. Well, American had gone for 15 years without a single fatality. And you think that they take off and land 500,000 times a year. And they came up with this one ad that was just classic, and it was a maintenance person walking through the airport, and he said he says he's looking out at the airplane and he's admiring the airplane, and then he turns down and he looks at a little kid and he says, "This is why I do what I do," and so it was just so powerful because that was keeping those people safe, and tying that emotional attachment to it, I think is just so powerful. Well, this has been great, Jason, and I could talk forever about this. I think strategy is one of those things that it really defines what the CISO needs to get done in an organization to really support the organizational goals. So what final advice would you give to current CISOs, emerging CISOs, experienced CISOs, those people going down this journey of establishing a strategy and carrying that out?
I would say you're not alone. So don't act alone. So you may be responsible for certain parts of your program, vision to goals, goals to strategy, maybe there, but probably not so much the details of the strategy. lean on the expertise and the background, and I would say the intellectual diversity of others, because they're in your organization. They know it. And everybody in your organization reports to you in the context of information security. So treat them that way. Treat them in the standpoint of like support them, champion them, and ask them for their input. Crowdsource it as best you can at each level. Because as you get more atomic in those details, like I mentioned, from the big visions to goals, the strategy conversation, you need to be able to actually go to the focus where the people have the expertise. So when you're building your strategy, don't think you have to do it all alone, or you have to have just this kind of limited space up here. And it's not like stand on the shoulder of giants. Grab hands with the giants in your organization already there, because I think there is more power in crowdsourcing than we know or realize. And I think folks need to take advantage of that more in their organization.
Great advice. Thanks a lot for taking the time today, Jason. I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure, Todd. It's been great. Thanks a lot.
Are you constantly thinking about how to keep your enterprise as secure as possible? Get to know Chrome Enterprise, the browser that will secure your organization without the added expense and complexity of additional browsers. Its simplified management features will free up your team to focus on critical security tasks that can be overlooked because of time and attention it takes to manage other solutions. Don't settle for a browser that compromises your organization. Visit securityweekly.com/Chrome now to start protecting your organization like never before.